Good afternoon. And I know it's a Saturday, and I'm so glad that so many of you are here. And it's a very big topic that we have to talk about. So before going too far out, we just quickly start. We've all had our introductions, um, and so I'll just take an immediate and deep dive. Firstly, to start with, the word craft itself is a very loaded word, especially in India, one of the largest repositories of makers in the world is in our country. But it's layered not just by the act of making, but by culture, history, tradition, so many things that all get entangled into one big ball of wool. So, in order to kind of make it simpler for us to understand, if I use the word makership instead of craft, we might be looking at it from a particular perspective. And I have it here with me people who really take makership forward. We do rely upon a whole culture of makers and where they come from, but the act of making is something which is not just historical, it's contemporary. It's an act that is innate to our being human beings. We build, and that is who we are. We see history to things that are being left. We make things that history or the future histories will see and judge us by. So this act of making as a continuum of the past is where all of us come from. So I'll start first with Vritima. The panel here is a very nice cross section. So we have Vritima, who comes from the world of spaces. Her spaces are beautifully gorgeous, contemporary, and very well made. It is, we often look at the guy who's doing POP on our sites as a POP guy, but that guy is a craftsman. He's a maker. And a lot of her work takes makership to very high levels. Divya, on the other hand, comes from a very visual background. The way she puts colors, textures, things together, it is a very different dimension to making because it is how the making is seen. And Sandeep is, I've known Sandeep for the last almost 30 years now. And he's a quintessential thinker. And his work with crafts is very deep and very extensive in terms of pushing the borders of whichever area you're taking up. So one by one, we'll start having a conversation on how they see contemporary and future makerships panning out through your work as well as through your parts.
Hi everyone, I'm Vritima. I have a craft practice called Project 810. We work across furniture, spaces, and storytelling. We look at craft not just as ornamentation, but we look at it as a way of thinking. For me, in my practice, I try to distill craft into more illustrative expressions, and Ayush is known that we work on many projects together where we pick up an idea and we try to bring in the makers into play, and we try and just bring their story out. So yeah, this is a few slides. These are few images from our furniture collection. We've tried to take the craft of weaving and we've created more minimal expressions. And the next slide, these are the final images of the furniture. And then we've also used weaving in spaces, and we've tried to create, these screens. And both the furniture and interiors, we've taken weaving and created like sort of background elements into it. And these are just minimal expressions of craft in our spaces.
So, one interesting fact is that in India, almost 75% of crafts or makership is in the building industry. It is absolutely massive. So, to use crafts or use makership within the built spaces at a time where we are struggling with timelines, budgets, monies, class buildings, industrial occupation, the space that craftspeople traditionally occupied. I think your work is really interesting in the sense that it pares it down to something very essential, very modern. What do you think about, because 75% of over 200 million people is a lot of people. How do you think your work can inspire or push people to, within the new context of no time, no money, which all of us are very aware of, how do you think your work can push the idea of makership within spaces, real makership? It's not tokenized. What are your thoughts? How do you think you push that order? And
Ayush, for us, there are three things that really stand out. One is intuition, second one is identity, and the last one is just communication.
What is the business of design? So to my understanding, the business of design, whatever the kind of design it is, whether it's furniture or objects or architecture, is basically to enhance a lifestyle or living or problem solving. It is intended to make better for greater good. That is the purpose of the business of design. If you pull further back and say, what is the business of craft? To my mind, the business of craft is luck. We're talking about something that is made by hand, and therefore the power of hand is really what craft is for me. It is what makes a home-cooked meal special, as opposed to running by a fixed menu or recipe. The maker is inconsistent, is imperfect, and that is what creates a connection between the soul and what you are consuming. So I'm going to show you some examples of what we've done. This is a series of furniture called Dambu, inspired by the Dambu stools that I think are all over the streets, or at least used to be. So this one's made in wire. They take a pharma and then they put all this nepro together. All the seats are obviously all woven, and this went to Stockholm and for the lobby of this hotel. And what was interesting is that we allowed them to keep it spontaneous. So you didn't have to like have a group of four people can sit in one place. You could move the furniture around, which again, spontaneity is an aspect of love in design or craft in design. And this is a close-up of the dumbbell table. I love the form. As you can see, it has imperfections. You can see the lines, they're not perfectly parallel because it's been done by hand, and I think that imperfection is what makes it sublime. You also try and infuse soul when you work with craft. It is not a machine that is doing this. Can this be done by a machine? Of course, yes. Most of everything that we consume can be made by machine, cheaper, quicker, all of that. But the question is, a craftsperson who works with his hands is transferring his soul, quite like the analogy of a home-cooked meal, to your table or to your home or to your office. And so that transference of soul is craft. That is why I wrap craft, at least. So here you're looking at something called the Shunya vases. It was made during COVID, and I wanted to take the idea of everything and nothing, which is what Shunya means. It's zero, but that zero includes endless possibilities. So an optimist always. This is the Kalash, again in marble. It's an contemporary interpretation of the traditional Kalash. This is a hand-cut granite, light as a kore, and that I think craft comes from a place of heart. And that's why I really value it. I value very much people like Sandeep who work a lot more with it than I do. Yeah, okay. We can go to what for last.
so, I really love the aesthetic and your approach. But on the other hand, striving for perfection is something that artisans naturally are inclined to be. So, and it's a great conversation we could have, because if the first makers of, say, the Banarsi saris were to say, they're okay with the imperfect, they might not have got to the kinkabs that they've done. So at what point do you think this pursuit of perfection and the handmadeness of it, what is the intersection in your works?
I think it's different for different people, and if a craftsperson is striving, so it is not to say imperfect means ki kuch bhi laga do. I'm not trying to say that. But what I am saying is that when you work with hand, you may not get a line absolutely straight, and that's okay. It's a fabric and it's woven. Not to say that the quality of the weaving is not superlative, not to say that at all. It must be. And it is beyond superlative. But hand has its natural imperfections, and from one object to the other, which is couture, really, right? Every time you make a garment for one person, it is the highest form of fashion. Whereas that's what craft does. It is each piece is going to have its own construct in that sense.
In a way, it's almost like the hand has its own signature.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
each hand has its own signature.
Each hand doesn't, every
Yeah.
product manifested is its own signature. Absolutely. So, what is the future of a bespoke product? I would hope the future is ecstatic, because in this age where we live in, mass production has its advantages, of course. It serves design by providing something reasonable to as many people as possible. But when you reach an age and a time, in an age of plenty and perhaps more than plenty, then are you really going to, do you really go and want another product of some beauty or whatever you may? I want soul. I want to give soul and I want to receive souls. And that's what craft is.
So, it's got to be then looking at what the signature of each process that it leads to that craft. So, yesterday I was getting my wife a patola sari. It's something she really, really wanted for the longest time. And it was really nice because, most of you see what a patola is. Front and back is the same. The lines are perfectly imperfect. It's a very subtle line. And I think that is a line of beauty as well. At what point does something have life and not life? And to dance on that line is a skill that very few artisans have. And I think this ability to negotiate the imperfections is something that not many people talk about. So I'm really glad that you spoke about it, because, very often we impose a perfection on a craftsperson. I remember when I finished, an idea and I came out, and we have people giving very skilled artisans an IKEA catalog and say, "Humko kitchen aisa chahiye hai." Now, to think about it now is, really what were they thinking when we did that? But those were the times, and these are the times when those very carpenters are just not there. So, this bigger question of what we asked for makers is something that would be, open to all of us, and using design practice as you very much are, and this particular thing up. I think that's really.
So the other thing I want to add to this idea of someone asking a craftsperson to make like an IKEA type kitchen is when the British came into India, then this distinction, the European School of Thought and Education brought in this distinction between high art and low art, and craft somewhere became low art. And that is the biggest disservice anyone could have done to India, because craft is not low art, it is probably higher than the highest thinking art that can be existing. So we need to change that. We need to let everything, as ancient India did, it made no distinction. Kala is kala. It is not design and craft, it is kala. Everything is kala, if it is kala, that is. So, so this distinction between high art and low art must not exist. The craft is low, and design, as a designer, I am a greater thinker. I am not. The guy who is making it, or the lady who is making it, has more experience and a lineage and experience greater than mine. And I'm sure Sandeep will tell us a lot more about how he works with artisans and craftspeople. So that also is a misnomer which we need to correct.
Absolutely, and more about it. But certainly, you work very, very closely with artisans, and we'd love to see your work and then have a deeper discussion.
Yeah. But before that, continue this discussion about craft in design and which came first. I think before designers, architects, everyone existed with formal education to solve problems. Craftsmen were doing that job. And those things are standing tall till today. And just for me, they were designers before designers even existed, solving everyday problems. And that's how the material culture evolved, creating solutions. I studied design. I did furniture design, and mostly were influenced by Western design culture. And I didn't practice furniture design or any design for the next 4 years after graduating. And I discovered crafts, and I had this love for material and working with materials. And I always wanted to travel and explore. And the whole idea of me uh, wanting to explore started with a project, and that's how I discovered crafts in India. And what I liked was how craftsmen treat a material. It's not something that you just make and put it up in a shelf to be sold. It's a process. It's a tradition that kind of evolved over many generations. They know how a particular wood or bamboo or any form behaves or what season it works well. So they don't force the material to do something just for the sake of it. So they go with and they feel the material. So the material speaks to them and they speak to the material and they co-create something. And I wanted to explore that process with them, and that's how I started working with crafts abilities. So I'm not designing anything. I'm sticking with them. There is an idea. We just make it happen. Unlike an industrial process, when you're working with craftsmen, it's very intuitive. They know much better than I would know about the material. I might have a good idea. They will say, Sandeep, we won't do this. Say, महंगा हो जाए. इसलिए मेहनत करने का कोई फायदा नहीं. No one is going to buy us. Then I said, okay, let's try it out. Maybe people will like it. Let's see. So my practice has been mostly to do with experimenting and exploring his idea and pushing the boundaries a little more. Uh, this product is from Chennapatna. So they make toys. I went there to make smaller things. But they came up with this whole idea of Sandeep, we don't make much out of toys. We need to make hundreds of them to have a tangible revenue. So then I came back, said, what can I do with the small components? And I said, okay, I'm good at making chairs. Maybe let's make a chair out of it. So that's how this shape. So it's more like an interaction, collaboration that happens, and it's more like a co-creation, a symbiotic relationship between the craftsmen because they understand the material so well. They guide you through the whole process of what's possible with a particular material. Then they try to push the boundaries. So it's a long process that goes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Sandeep. I think your work really shows this collaborative aspect of makership. Why do you think, like, there are not very many design people who collaborate, as in really collaborate with artisans, and very often it's a drawing that has gone to the artisan to make. So what do you think is needed to make this change? Is it at education level? Is it exposure? You do a lot of teaching as well. So what do you think needs to change for the future to be more collaborative?
So we always depend on crafts community as a skill base rather than a knowledge base. And the world has become smaller. So aspirations of the crafts community also has grown bigger. Their generation don't want to take it forward because they don't see value in it because they have not been valued. And but people like us want to learn crafts. Can the master craftsman become the teacher? He can become the guru and kind of transfer the knowledge to some other one who is very keen to learn that process. I think If we can work towards that as an ecosystem, I think instead of having design schools, can we go back to a system where people are keen to work their hands because communities understanding knowledge and taking it forward can take that. That's my paper.
You know, there's something really interesting that I stay in Jaipur, and when we try and look for people who can draw the Jaipur arch, we can't find anyone. But you find a lot of people who can work in line, who can do a arch. And at some point, and to open this to all of you as well, that when we talk to the future, we talk about more collaborative, practices, working for with the best of skills. But how do we take our sensibilities ahead? Because, skill you can revive. Skill is like a recipe. But a sensibility is something which is off the eye, it's off the practice, it's off the land. And a sensibility takes generations to evolve. So just a quick open question to you as when you talk about the future, is it just objects or is it the sensibility of craft that we want to take to the future? So
Definitely, Ayush. I think it's the sensibility that has to carry forward. We have to not just look at the end result, but the process. We have to work very closely with the craftsmen and understand where they come from to achieve the final product. So as a practice as well, what I was saying earlier, when we look at identity, we look at intuition as well. I think we have to understand where the craftsman comes from and just honor the entire process as opposed to the end result. And that's how I work. And that's how I'd like to carry it forward.
Both, I would imagine. Oh.
But how? Because very often we look at an artist's sensibility as something of the past. And in this, it is rushed to be revolutionary. We sometimes discard things that are grown slowly. तो काली दाल होती है, माखनी दाल होती है, उसको पकना पड़ता है, वो जल्दी नहीं बनती है. So are we at some point also discarding to some extent the sensibility of an artisan and also in a way making it lesser than what it could be? So like if you look at Japan, sensibility is celebrated. Oh, how about India?
The humility, honestly, if clients, patrons, designers, all of us had a little more humility, then I think that I'm going to listen to what, as you said, like, or your craftsperson knows, that you have to allow them to meander their path and uncover, gain their trust before anything else to tell you how to go about something. All that requires time and space, and it is a matter of love, and you can't rush this kind of thing. It's just not possible. So I think that's something. It's question of time, but patronage also is very critical because someone out there needs to say, yes, take your time, give the person their time, allow them to create, allow them to collaborate, co-create, all of that. It can happen. As I said, the glass is always half full for me, so I think it's possible.
So, Sandeep, how do you think you want to push the idea of Indian sensibility? I know some of the projects you've done with Serendipity and all, they've been pushing the Indian sensibility a little bit forward in a very modern context. So,
has a lot of influences and because evolved over many decades, and there has been a lot of cross-pollination and it's difficult to define it. We cannot say it's Scandinavian furniture or it's Oriental furniture. Indian demographics doesn't allow us to kind of put it in a bracket. I think it's that's openness we have to explore. There were so many influences and so many cross connections happen here and there. Like it cut from Bali, I traveled to Patola, and I don't know, a lot of things had happened.
So I'll just take a share of few slides which are like my perspective. So now this is a project we did with the Serendipity Arts Festival called the Charpai Project to explore one of the simplest, most elegant furniture forms that has existed in the sub-fund. It is whatever we pick off from contemporary design practices. It's customizable, it's sustainable, it's flat pack, and it's your home. It's got engagement, etc., etc. In its essence, it is a craft being celebrated not just in division but also in communities. And probably the way we take it forward is the many ways in which we use it in our everyday. This in particular was a response to the extensive construction happening in Goa at the time we needed the project, where there were cities within the scaffolding. How do these charpais fit within cities was something we were exploring. This is another project that we work with the artists in Gujarat now. A lot of crafts have them so-called limitations, but in those limitations lie the possibilities as well. So this is, you might just see these very common, very ordinary, is the same craft, except it's broken down, taken apart into its purest essence, and taking something which only that particular artisan and craft can do. They rivet, they beat sheet, and they coat it with metal. This is also taking the idea path forward, but the other ways, playing within the brackets. This is using the cut-offs of the leather puppets. You might have seen the old Bomalaka leather puppets. Now, when they work with the puppets, a lot of small pieces are left. This is using those small pieces, degrading them, and making it a toy that you can make anything with. It is a makership being translated to another form of makership. Now, there is a very big social aspect that we tend to not see. We are in a country where per person employed through conventional industry is a cost of over 25 lakhs. That is what industry spends to employ one person. Given we are a country of 1.4 billion people, what is the kind of investment the country needs to put into employing everybody in industry? Is that even viable? Given the same metric or the crafts industry is only 45,000 rupees. 45,000 rupees is what kind of investment is needed to employ one person in the craft sector. We're looking at a sea change coming up. You're looking at AI taking our jobs. To me personally, working with crafts and the future is not a question of makership, it's not a question of products, it's a question of society. Are we looking at carefully employing all the people in our country? And herein, to me personally, lies the future of craft. Honorable, sustainable employment for a country like ours.
Thank you. Can we please have a big round of applause?